everyone, it's Jack from Cultaholic.com. It's Wednesday and there is yet more wrestling news to talk about. We're going to talk about various things in this video, so yeah, let's just crack on and take a look at those lovely headlines. First of all, another WWE Superstar is set to miss WrestleMania due to quarantine. Next up, a WWE Hall of Famer says that Sting was buried in that WrestleMania 31 match against Triple H. And finally, a new order by the mayor of Orlando has potentially put WWE's future Performance Center tapings in jeopardy. So first of all, the other day you may have seen the news that Dana Brooke is set to miss out on WrestleMania due to self-isolation. Huge commiserations to her. It's always a shame for a wrestler to miss out on WrestleMania. But now it's being reported from various sources, including the Wrestling Observer, that another superstar is also set to miss out on WrestleMania, and that is none other than Rey Mysterio. And again, it's for the same reason as Dana Brooke, self-isolation. And I don't know if it's a company-imposed rule or whether it's just personal choice by both of the superstars in question, but neither of them have actually tweeted or made any sort of social media post since the news has broken that they are indeed isolating. It's uncertain what Mysterio's role was going to be at WrestleMania. He most recently appeared on one of the empty arena shows on Raw, where he defeated Andrade in a non-title match. This could have potentially set up a US title match for Mysterio, although I think that it's more likely that there would have been another match in place. I'll explain what I mean. So Mysterio and Humberto Carrillo have recently been feuding, of course, with Andrade and Angel Garza. It could have been that both teams, this is again just my opinion, but it could have been that both teams were going to be mixed up in the Raw Tag Team title picture alongside the champions, the Street Profits. Now, of course, we know that the planned match for WrestleMania is the Street Profits defending those Raw Tag Team titles, but only against one other team, that team being Andrade and Angel Garza. And again, just like in the case of Dana Brooke, it is a huge shame to see Rey Mysterio miss out on WrestleMania. Even if you're not particularly a big fan of Dana Brooke or Rey Mysterio, it's always nice at WrestleMania to see so many superstars get involved, even if it's just in one of the pre-show battle royals or something, but it looks like both could have had more crucial roles to play. And again, it's such a shame for both wrestlers. Hopefully they're going to be fine throughout all of this, and then when they come back, they can come back stronger than ever. Next up, there's been an update on a potential main event for night one of WrestleMania, because obviously WrestleMania, if you've somehow missed this news, is taking place across two nights, on Saturday the 4th of April and Sunday the 5th, but it's being pre-taped. Pretty much as we speak, this week WrestleMania is being taped. It's just a surreal situation. Now, according to WrestleVotes, we shouldn't be surprised to see Becky Lynch defending her Raw Women's title against Shayna Baszler as the main event of night one. Obviously, last year we saw the first ever women's main event in WrestleMania history as Becky Lynch took on Ronda Rousey and Charlotte Flair in that triple threat match. Does this count as the second ever women's main event in WrestleMania history, because there's going to be technically two main events across 2 days, or are we only counting, I guess, the main event of the second day? I suppose you've got to count both. If it's across 2 days, then there are two main events, and if so, that's a huge accolade for Becky Lynch, you know, main eventing WrestleMania in 2 consecutive years. WrestleVotes also says that the rumored plan is apparently 16 matches split evenly, so 8 matches on the Saturday and 8 matches on the Sunday. Now, that's kind of interesting for those of you who may have been wondering, is this 2-day WrestleMania going to mean a completely halved show with you know, shorter run times? It seems like it's been slightly diminished. It might not, you know, it might not go as long as a 1-day event would, but when you add the 2 days together, Saturday and Sunday, it'll probably go on for longer with 8 matches on both shows, you'd at least think. Is this a good thing or a bad thing? I want to know your opinions down in the comment section below, because that's quite hefty, isn't it, to be fair? An 8-match show followed immediately by another 8-match show. And some of those matches, of course, are going to go pretty long because they're big, grand WrestleMania matches, of course. Then again, some of the matches could go shorter than you'd think. We know that Goldberg thrives more when he's in a shorter match. So I guess it all depends. But 8 matches per show does sound like quite a long runtime when you add it all together. Still, it does address, I guess, a criticism of recent WrestleManias where the crowd have been burnt out towards the end of the night. Obviously, there's no live crowd, but to stop audiences from getting burnt out while they're watching at home. Because recently, in the past 2 or 3 years, we've seen mammoth shows with like upwards of 10 or 11 matches, and because we've split it down the middle and there's only going to be apparently 8 on each show, I think that might break it down into slightly more easily digestible chunks, but again, it all just remains to be seen. Next up, fans of NXT would have been very disappointed to learn that NXT TakeOver Tampa Bay has been cancelled. WWE are not going to be pre-taping that show like they are with WrestleMania. It has just been scrapped from the calendar due to the ongoing circumstances, and I guess WWE, quite rightly, want to focus instead on making sure that WrestleMania is in the can. But WWE recently revealed their solution for still putting on those big matches that seem to be being built up for TakeOver Tampa Bay. It was announced via Sports Illustrated that some of those matches are going to be airing on weekly NXT moving forwards. The first starting on the Wednesday, April 1st edition of the show. Only one match had actually been announced for TakeOver Tampa Bay, but several more were being built up to. But the one match that had been announced was the women's ladder match to determine the number one contender for the NXT Women's Championship. And we didn't even really know all of the competitors in that match. Chelsea Green, Tegan Nox and Mia Yim had all qualified for it, but we didn't know the full lineup yet. Now, originally, Mercedes Martinez and Candice LeRae were set to wrestle on last week's NXT to determine another slot in this multi-woman ladder match, but of course last week's NXT was kind of scrapped. I mean, it was still aired, but matches were scrapped from it just due to the ongoing circumstances. Aside from that ladder match, two other huge matchups were being built up to for this TakeOver event. They were another Johnny Gargano versus Tommaso Ciampa match, another installment in their classic series of matches, their very intense series of matches, and also an NXT Championship match between the champion Adam Cole and the challenger Velveteen Dream. But again, via Sports Illustrated, it has been announced that several matches are going to take place on the coming weeks of NXT, the regular NXT show on Wednesdays, and it's all set up a pretty hefty, a pretty stacked lineup for this week's NXT. Let's take a look. So, first of all, announced for the show, Triple H will be there to announce the Gargano and Ciampa situation. Of course, those two recently had a huge brawl all throughout the Performance Center, trashing various rooms, and it was a lot of fun. So Triple H is going to be there to sort it all out. Matt Riddle versus Roderick Strong, that could be a wonderful match. Tyler Breeze versus Austin Theory. Austin Theory, of course, one of the quickest rising stars in the world of wrestling. NXT champion Adam Cole will share a special message on the episode. Of course, that's probably going to refer to the fact that he just became the longest reigning NXT champion of all time, and a couple of matches as well that are going to address this multi-woman ladder match that was meant to take place at TakeOver. Those matches are a pair of singles qualifying matches. Candice LeRae, of course, she was originally meant to take on Mercedes Martinez, but now she will take on Kaden Carter, which I think means that Candice might be ending up in that ladder match if she's not the one who's been switched out of the qualifying match, if that makes sense. And also Xia Li taking on Aaliyah. Next up, a certain top-level WWE star has praised Brock Lesnar for his professionalism and his ability to understand the crowd during a wrestling match. And it's none other than his WrestleMania opponent, his number one contender for his belt, Drew McIntyre. Drew was speaking to Alex McCarthy of TalkSport and said basically about Lesnar, he's the man. I don't know what happened with Ambrose and their situation. They had that match at WrestleMania 32, of course, which was quite underwhelming. And then Ambrose said that Lesnar wasn't really motivated to work with him. But according to Drew's personal experience, he says, I don't know what happened with Ambrose and their situation. He's somebody that I'm friends with and I had so many great matches with, so I don't know what happened there. But in my experience, Brock has always gone above and beyond to ensure I look as good as I can possibly look. He then referred to that recent Raw, maybe the last Raw with a live crowd, I can't quite remember, but the one where the show opened with Drew essentially battering Brock Lesnar and hitting him with 3 huge Claymore kicks, and Drew looking really dominant in the build to WrestleMania. He said, on that Raw, I walked out, looked Brock in the eye and dropped him 3 times. I'm sure you probably noticed one of those kicks wasn't necessarily planned. He went out of his way, he felt the crowd because that's how good he is and I'm a professional. There was no physical cues, so we just kept on going. Drew then goes on to say, I was like, wow, this guy is unbelievable, and I'm glad I'm at a level where I can read him at the same time. We're working together here, and he's more than willing to go overboard to make me look as good as possible. So that's really good to hear, isn't it, from Drew? We've often questioned Lesnar's motivation in the past, especially with these long title reigns where he rarely even shows up to defend the belt, apart from on the biggest shows. But it's nice to hear Drew say this, and to recognise that Lesnar has been wrestling for a long time, and by this point, probably has got quite a wealth of experience behind him, and it's good to learn as well that he can be quite selfless in trying to make the other stars of the show look as good as they possibly can. Now we're going to shift tone entirely and talk about someone saying that Sting got buried at WrestleMania 31. And not just anybody, by the way. This is a former WWE Hall of Famer. No, a current WWE Hall of Famer. You're that forever. What am I talking about? A former WWE employee who is now over in AEW. I'm talking, of course, about Arn Anderson. On his podcast, Arn Anderson was talking about that match, that WrestleMania 31 no-holds-barred match between Triple H and Sting, and said that Sting was basically buried on commentary. Let's take a look at what he had to say. Arn says they just buried him on commentary. If you go back and watch it and listen to it, they just buried him. And he implies that it was Vince McMahon feeding those lines to commentary from the back. He says, I saw a tackle, drop down and hip toss, and those type of spots to try and reset the audience, and all it did was give the announcers, and I know it was fed to them, it just gave them the chance to bury Sting. He then mentions them referring to Sting as a minnow in a big pond, just totally condescending, guy is out of his element, this is WrestleMania now sort of stuff, you're just a small minnow in a huge lake. He goes on to say whatever all the commentary was exactly, it was meant to basically beat you over the head with we won the war, the Monday Night Wars of course, where WWE, we won the war. This is your big star? Well, he ain't a big star here tonight. Arn also revealed a couple of other things. One, he said that he would have personally preferred Sting to have faced The Undertaker, which I remember in many people's mind back then was the natural sort of matchup, wasn't it? Sting, this dark figure of WCW, taking on the dark figure of WWE. It would have made potentially a lot more sense. Also, Arn says that he's not quite sure what all the run-ins were about, which I remember a lot of people also agreeing with at the time. Of course, you had DX interfering to help out Triple H, and then really bizarrely, you had the NWO come out to interfere on behalf of Sting, despite the NWO and Sting being like mortal enemies for the majority of the peak time of the Monday Night Wars. So that was a little bit confusing as well. So yeah, some scathing words for Arn there, but words that I think fans of Sting will be quite comforted to hear, because I remember at the time there was a lot of hullabaloo, I guess, about what was going on, saying that Sting had indeed been buried. I mean, spoilers if you've not seen it, but Triple H wins that match, and then Sting shakes his hand afterwards, and it just seems a bit of a strange booking decision. This was Sting's WrestleMania moment, his big WWE coming out party. He'd finally crossed the line and come over to WWE, and then Triple H beats him at WrestleMania. And finally, could WWE's future Performance Center tapings be in jeopardy? They've used this recently to work around the current restrictions regarding live shows, and they've managed to tape quite a lot of content, as if they do on YouTube, managed to tape quite a lot of wrestling in advance. But an executive order by the mayor of Orlando, Florida, could have put that in danger. The mayor, Jerry Demings, or Demings, not quite sure which, he issued an executive order last night telling people to stay at home, and that comes into effect at 11 p.m. on Thursday this week. So by then, in theory, WWE will have already taped all of WrestleMania. So WrestleMania is not going to be in danger, but it's what comes after WrestleMania that could be an issue. The order says that you can only travel to work if you're providing essential service. And while media is listed as one of those essential services, I don't know where WWE fits into that media definition. It could be something they could try to use to try and get around these restrictions, but at the same time, well, one, are they going to be able to? And two, should they even do that? You know, is that a bit of an irresponsible move were WWE to pursue that avenue? Regardless, according to the reported WWE shooting schedule, it seems as though by Thursday night, they won't have just recorded WrestleMania, they'll have also taped the Raw after WrestleMania. So they'll be covered for the next sort of 10 days or so. But after that, it all just remains to be seen what's going to happen and when those restrictions will be lifted. But I suspect that we could be missing out potentially on some WWE shows heading forwards. Thanks very much for watching this news video. That's pretty much it. I'll give you a match to go and watch, and then you can come back and discuss it in the comment section down below, as I have been doing. Hopefully you've all been enjoying that. For this one, I'll go for a different WrestleMania 31 match. I like to keep them kind of relevant to what's being talked about in the news video. So instead of the Triple H versus Sting one, because I've already spotted the result of that, why not watch the main event of WrestleMania 31? I think potentially one of the biggest sleeper hit WrestleMania main events of all time, even without the big shocking finish. And if you've never seen it, then you're in for a treat.